My goal has been accomplished, Houston.
What's your goal?
10 people showed. I knew it. Welcome, everyone. You got the beats going this morning, Houston.
This is one of those like old songs that came back recently into your life, and you're like, oh yeah, forget how hard this hits. It's nice.
Awesome. Good morning, Venus. Who's first in the chat? You win. Yeah, let us know where you tuning in from.
Yeah.
Let us know, everyone. We got Nebraska. We got morning. Hi, Stephanie. Hey, Beth Dykeman.
Just down the road.
Colleague, amazing educational leader. Hey, Beth. Awesome.
Los Lunas, New Mexico in the house. I'm heading to New Mexico for New Year's this year. Any tips?
Houston, surprise. Surprise, Arizona's here. Amy, welcome. That wasn't very funny. I was trying. We got Southern Cal. Virginia. Hey, Hattie. Heather in Michigan. Ooh, McCall, Idaho. You got lots of snow yet? That's like getting that time of year. Carmel, California. You might have already said that one. Kelly in Richland, Washington. Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Iowa, go Hawks. I thought you were meaning like go Hawks like the Seahawks. We're on a roll, but you're talking about some different Hawks in Iowa.
We had MTSS and SEL folks in the house. Got Oregon. Morning from NYC. Susan's here.
Laurel's here because she didn't get enough of you, Houston, at the ISCA.
They said, welcome. We got more.
All right, so we get going in just a moment. Got over 100 with us live. Very exciting. Danielle, tons. She said that must mean snow. I'm like just catching up in the chat. I'm just guessing. Awesome. Well, Houston, we got a lot of incredible educators and leaders with us today. We want to really maximize their time. What are we doing here today? Why are we here? I'm in the right place if.
You're looking for anything related to building staff culture, and if you're looking for high leverage moves, you're in the right place today. We're going to be talking about some low burden, high impact, practical strategies to put a focus on cultivating a culture of belonging, culture of engagement, culture of well-being, and just to support staff who are doing the work right now. We're in November. We're getting into the first sort of valley of the year where you're on the high, and a little bit of like that. When you slide across a kitchen floor and eventually it comes to a bit of a stop, you got to run again. And we need momentum.
I've never heard that example used ever in education, but there's a first for everything. But that's awesome. That makes sense. I'm with you.
Yeah, we all have sometimes like we get to ride out momentum and then we need to generate momentum again. So today's about building staff culture, some practical strategies, some things to know ahead of time. We get these questions regularly, so we want to upfront name. We'll be sending out the slides in PDF format. So you'll get these slides today, know that in advance. We're also recording this webinar, so you can watch later, share as you want to after the fact. We'll get an email with some of these resources all in one place for you. And drop questions in the chat as you have them. We got an amazing team who is hanging out with us today, and any questions that you have, drop them in the chat. You can send them directly to hosts and panelists or everyone, and we'll pull those aside into a document, see if we can protect some time on the end for chatting, making sure your questions get answered. So let us jump in. I love words, John. You know I love words.
Yes.
And I think that words play an underrated role in how we experience the world around us. The way we think about things derives the way we act with them. Our paradigms drive our practices, and culture and climate are two words, two paradigms, two mental models that everyone in the education space is exposed to. Without common language, sometimes it's hard to address them, improve them. So let's break them apart a little bit. Our favorite definition of CharacterStrong Comes from a guy named James Hunter. He wrote a book called The Culture. And he says, culture goes much deeper than a mission statement. Culture is how group members actually behave repeatedly and habitually. I've always loved that definition, John, because you can boil it down to one word: behavior.
Doesn't matter
Culture's
what's
behavior.
necessarily up on the wall, right? That looks really good, that says that this is what we're about. It's how people actually behave repeatedly and habitually. That's your culture. And I think that's a big difference, right? I don't just walk in and be like, oh, that's what it says, so that must be what it is. Not necessarily, as we all know. It's how people actually behave.
And all people in a building. One of my favorite lines from Dr. Clayton Cook, our Chief Development Officer here at CharacterStrong, he says, when it comes to school culture change, we are first and foremost in the business of adult behavior change. We're putting a focus intentionally on adults in a building with that role modeling, which we know is going to have one of the biggest impacts on student experience and how students learn and how people really show up in a building each day, which is why I love disentangling these two words from each other. Sometimes it's school culture and climate. Well, when you lump them together, you forget how they interact with each other. Climate is the product of the attention we pay to behavior. So school's effects on its people, it's something you can actually feel. One of our longtime friends, John, Phil Boyd, been working in school culture for a really long time. He says you either have a school culture by default or a school culture by design. Meaning you always have a culture of some kind because people are going to always behave in some kind of way. The question is, are you paying attention to it? Are you providing clear expectations around it? Are you reminding people and holding people accountable to those behaviors? Are you celebrating or recognizing those behaviors when they're positive or good? Lots of different ways that we can pay attention to behavior. And when we pay attention to those behaviors, well, guess what? We can improve that culture, which in turn improves the way we feel in a building or a classroom. That's a big deal. The way we feel in any given space impacts everything we do. Do we feel safe psychologically? Do we feel appreciated, heard, connected, cared for, empowered, supported, loved? Whatever that word is, each of those words represent a way that would increase the likelihood that I might engage in my school, or in a staff perspective, am I engaged in my work? Do I want to stick around this place? In education, people don't quit jobs, people quit people. People quit behaviors that don't make them feel empowered, supported, or believed in the ways that we need to in our professional lives. So how do we get there? Well,
I think, Houston, real quick, one thing that I would just add to that, just as this idea of a lot of times what we have is we're not equipping our leaders. They have a million things on their plate as well. And a lot of times the support they're not getting is, well, how do I do that? If you think about a building principal or a leadership team, if that was the equivalent of like a business organization and that many people with the type like that they had to lead, that's a big organization. In many cases, the school or the district is one of the biggest like organizations, businesses, in the entire community. There's a lot of but a lot of times where we don't get instruction, where we don't get support is how I organizationally, right, continuing to improve that culture and climate. We get a lot of support in other areas. How do we evaluate? How do we do it? But how do I actually drive that culture and climate forward? Thank you, Amanda, in the chat. I'm on to something. All right.
Yeah, well framed, John. And that's why using backwards design is something we use in the way that we build our professional learning, the way that we build our content, our curricula. Makes sense. We start with the outcomes in mind. And we move from right backwards to left. What outcomes do we want? Let's use an example. Let's say I want to be physically fit or healthy. We go backwards. Well, what behaviors, culture, repeatedly and habitually do I need in order to become more physically fit or healthy? Well, routine exercise, run, lifting weights, like walk, whatever that looks like, those behaviors are going to drive that outcome. But even before behaviors, need to move back one more. What supports or plans, routines, accountability do you need to put in place to support behavior change or repetition? And that might look like calendar reminders, accountability partners, mapping out fitness classes, laying out clothes the night before, get new shoes to get you going, download an app, any of those many things that are the supports that drive the behaviors to achieve the outcomes. So let's apply it to our world, our work. We think about culture and climate. There's lots of ways to think about what sort of outcomes you want when it comes to culture and climate. For us at CharacterStrong, we root all of our work around these three primary outcomes for both students and staff. increased well-being, increased sense of belonging and psychological safety, and improved engagement in school or academics for students, but also just engagement in my job, engagement in the classroom, engagement in staff meetings, engagement in the process of improving or making our school the best place it can be. So what do we need to do to work backwards from that model? What behaviors are we looking for to drive these outcomes? Well, we're looking for behaviors to promote well-being, belonging, engagement. We're going to dive into each one of these and give you some really practical strategies, behaviors, systems, supports, plans that you can implement in the context of your work to create a culture where people feel like they are well, like they belong, and they're engaged.
So as we go here, what I just want to put a spotlight on is this. If we're going to show up and you're going to give your time, we are always going to work to give a lot of really practical resources like Houston just said. However, our goal is not to overwhelm with the why side, the thinking side, but that part matters a lot. If we're not thinking right about how that it is, we can take any one of these practical things, throw it at a wall and hope that it sticks. But we have to really think about, even in a simple way, and then equip our leaders with how those different practical strategies fit into a way to systemically move forward to improve the culture and climate of my building for my staff and my students. So just connecting those dots, it matters, right? We don't want to overwhelm, but we are going to give you a lot of practical tools today.
One place we can start with is assessing where we're at right now. How is the culture and climate at our school? When it's related to well-being, belonging, and engagement, do I have any way to sort of tap into that? Well, one of the things that we'll provide coming out of today is a few things, and we'll send you this page as a follow-up, little review from some of the things that we'll talk specifically about today, and it'll also include slides from today. So know that this is coming your way, some really practical resources that we'll talk about, and then you'll have all in one place on the far side. One of those things is the educator culture and climate scale. Simple, not complicated, little perception survey you can use with staff, asking questions related to belonging, well-being, and engagement. There's a simple rating scale available, and then there's some interpretation instructions at the bottom. Each one with relevant items to those three outcomes. So a simple thing that we can use to assess where we're at, which will drive what comes next.
You have a simple validated instrument that you can use, right? To then go, where should we start first? Or where should we put the time that we have? Where should we point that energy? This will help you with that by getting some of that data up front that you can share with your staff.
Yeah, I appreciate the commentary in the chat. Where do I start? Where do I begin? Sometimes that's the biggest barrier or hurdle for us, is to know I have a limited amount of time. How can I use it most effectively or efficiently? And a little data like that will help drive where or which tools, even coming out of today, you might put a focus on. So let's start with well-being. In a culture of well-being, we're talking about experiences that promote positive thoughts, attitudes, and feelings, as well as resilience in the face of challenges. My capacity to navigate adversity increases when I have foundational well-being in my life. When I have low mental health, when my well-being is on the lower end of the spectrum, it's much harder to navigate the adversity that's coming at me every day. And in education, we're facing a lot of it. So an intentional focus on improving well-being is one of those protective factors that allows us to navigate the adversity of the world and our work. It's a proactive approach. When we put an intentional focus on it up front, the adversity is going to come at some point, and these are ways that we can prepare in advance. Start with hearing from you all. What experiences promote well-being for your staff? Or if you're a classroom educator, if you are in the classroom right now, or a teacher, maybe something that's been going on in your school that's promoted well-being for you, we're interested to know what experiences are promoting your well-being right now.
Yeah, and Houston, as people are sharing in the chat, and let's highlight a few of those, I think one of the first comments was really important, right? This is really hard when we're seeing such an increase, right, with the mental challenges that we're maybe seeing, students and staff. And we think about the approach then to that, what we're talking about today is going to be tier 1 strategies, foundational strategies that are not only going to be helpful for those that are struggling, right? It's for all. It's going to be beneficial for all. We need to ensure that consistently there are tier 1 practices that are happening. Then we know that there are going to be some that need more targeted supports, more specific supports. And we can speak to that. We even have a tier 2 curricula on the student side that's coming this spring that directly connects even to our tier 1. More on that later, but we're talking about that foundational. It is hard. But if all we do is live in the reactive, then it's brutal. So let's live in the hard work of staying proactive with ensuring that consistently and predictably we're bringing forward some of these different practices so that we can keep that tier 1 strong. Then it helps us to be able to do that more targeted tier 2 and tier 3 work more effectively. The way that I would flip it, what happens if you try to do the tier 2, tier 3 reactive work without a strong tier 1?
Some great ideas coming in the chat as well, John, to that proactive approach, systems around recognition, gratitude. In fact, a lot of things coming around just feeling appreciated. This is something we talk about a lot. Mother Teresa says it best: people crave attention and appreciation more than they crave bread. People will work harder for attention and appreciation, oftentimes more than a salary increase or promotion. We just want to feel valued in our work. That makes sense. It's one of the biggest pieces of our well-being puzzle. In fact, well-being is supported, at least in the research, in 3 primary domains in our life. To be clear, not the only ways that we can increase or support our well-being, but mental, emotional, and social well-being are all their own sort of dimensions of a greater picture of our mental health. So let's zoom into each one of them and talk about some practical strategies. Gratitude is the big one. Gratitude is one of the most research-backed, evidence-based practices that improves our mental well-being specifically. Scarlett Lewis says it really well. Scarlett Lewis, for those of you who know her work, she lost her son in the Sandy Hook shooting. She's an amazing speaker and advocate for this work. And she says, when it comes to gratitude, you can't have a grateful thought and an angry thought at the same time. Our brains operate linearly, even if they move fast, which means we only can have one thought in any given moment. What we put our focus on, what we give our attention to, amplifies. That's why the power of gratitude makes sense. When I'm putting an intentional, disciplined, focused practice on feeling gratitude, it reduces away the stress of other things in the world. It changes where I'm putting my attention. So mentally, I'm more well. But in order to do that effectively, we need some really practical strategies. You just ask people what they're grateful for, and you're going to get some generic answers. So we needed some fun, creative, different tools to tackle that. Our team put together some awesome resources specifically around gratitude. 'Tis the season, November of gratitude. So one of those things that we'll be sharing here in the chat is some really fun gratitude resources. Work that is student or family facing, we always try to offer in Spanish as well. So you'll see these available in Spanish. But you'll find some resources pre-K through 5th grade, and then 6th through 12th grade. Low burden, easy to use, easy to bring into the content of your classroom. You also got some things down at the bottom for teachers, school counselors, admin, some dinner conversation starters for family and friends, podcasts, and there's Scarlett Lewis right there.
I think we've currently had over 7,000 people that have downloaded these to use them in different ways. We just need tools. We just need ideas, right? And we always want to be there to be able to give different ways. And I would say the only thing that has changed Houston from being in the district, right, and doing district work to now being at CharacterStrong is we get to put our sole attention on this work. And that gives us the ability then to better serve and do some of that lifting, because we know so many that are with us today. You got 100 different things on your plate right now that you're trying to keep up. So let us help to put some of these in front of you and things that you can try. And we always want to be a trusted source or a resource for you during the year.
Let's use one of these gratitude compliment creations right now, John, as a way to practice some gratitude. You get one that you want to try out right now?
Let's see. Well, you can just stop at a random one. Let's see. Yeah, let's see.
feel free in the chat. You could
Yeah.
also celebrate someone using one of these as a tool.
Yeah, I'll use one just because we're talking Houston. I'll do one for you. So over the weekend, I'll say over the weekend when you did, and it doesn't always specifically fit, but when you called me out of the blue just to chat, right? Not for any other reason, just to check in. It made me feel important. Please keep being the intentional, kind you that you are. That wasn't super clean, but it was fun. It was mad lib.
It was
2.0.
Well received, John. Thank you. It was John's birthday this last weekend. So it was out of the blue. And it was to also just chat and catch up with you, hear how your weekend was going. You got some cool quality time in this weekend. And I loved checking in.
Thanks, Tara. Appreciate it, Stephanie. 35 feels good. Just plain. That's not even close.
Lots of different ways to support our well-being. One of them is through the domain of our mental health, or mental well-being. We also have emotional well-being. One of our favorite practical strategies here, maybe some of you have even seen us use this tool, is called To the Person Who. We believe at CharacterStrong that specificity drives significance, right? Instead of the generic email. In fact, I just had this compliment. I was able to be one of the keynote speakers at the Association of Middle-Level Educators last week in Orlando. Such a fun conference, getting to hang out with at a national scale with middle-level educators all over the place. And I was talking about this premise right here. And the guy came up to me and he said, you know, you had me at this idea because my least favorite thing that happens in my building is when someone says, thanks for all you do. Because he's like, do you even know what I do? You're just saying thanks for all of it. But like, what if you name something specific? No, thank you for this thing that you do, that I saw you do, that I recognize the value of, or the creativity you gave to it, or the passion that you added to it, or the way that you shared that thing with other people. And I really love that premise and that insight. He's like, that's my least favorite compliment. Thanks for all you do. My most favorite compliment is thank you for this one thing that you do, because specificity drives significance.
And yet, and I know that you'd be right with me on this, Houston, my empathetic statement to that person might be, one, it takes a lot of courage to come up to someone and say thank you for anything, right? The idea that they took the time to let you know. And at the root of that might just be, they don't know how. You know, the number of high school students that I worked with, that we had specific exercises on how we give very specific compliments, but not just that, how we even receive those gifts that we've just been given. And that was some of the most powerful like practices that we did. It was how to be specific in giving it, but also how to receive it. And what I'm pulling out of this is we're not beyond that as adults, right? Like that's all we know sometimes. So what if we gave some opportunities instead of saying, you don't give specific, like let's practice being really specific. So don't get generic, let's be. And so this is where these types of activities can be really fun because they can be playful. They also are teaching us to be more specific and identifying that praise.
Yeah, well said, John. And a simple way to utilize this or pull this back into your work is spend time as a team, a small team, or even as an individual, naming some of these specific categories that allow you, what I love about this practice, to the person who makes my job easier. Right away, from many of us, not everyone in this room, but my guess is a lot of people in this room have someone who comes to mind if you spend a moment thinking about it. Who about that person like who finds good in all situations, who's just the optimist, who brings positivity to all the spaces that they're in? My guess is one or two people start to come to mind. And the power of this practice, in fact, one of the things that we're going to provide on the far side of today, I come down here to the person who, and I hit click to download, you're going to find a little excerpt from Deep Kindness, my first book, where I talk about the power of the compliment and how it's a more challenging skill than I think sometimes we think it is. But just below it, after it talks about the power of specificity, is a list. To the person who lives out the value of kindness, makes me laugh until I cry, takes me out of my comfort zone, shows expertise, connected to their purpose. Not a long list, certainly not an exhaustive list. But as you look through these, you'll see some prompts that hopefully helps you think about a person, and then just some example language that you might spend a little bit of time less than 5 minutes in most of these situations. Sending this note to someone.
And I think a couple of things that I want to highlight here, Houston, that I think just are important. Like earlier, I think it was Dwight Carter put in the chat, like, what is a practice? Well, centering routines before we start, meetings, and like what that does. And I think about, what if we had a consistent practice where we brought gratitude, even in fun ways like this, into starting a staff meeting or a time together. And this could be with students as well, or where we give opportunities to share, whether it's good news or compliments, kudos to others. And it's not just something because it feels good, it's what it's actually doing in the brain. The neuroscience piece that helps when I get centered, when I put a focus on gratitude, when I can put a focus on something good, even though there's so much that feels like maybe it's not, or that's stressful. And I think the idea here is that I think sometimes these feel overwhelming because we'll say, I don't have the time. And the reality is we do have the time. Because it's not always about putting more on the plate. It's about being more intentional with what we're already doing. And I think most staff members, if we were talking about a staff meeting or students in a classroom, were to say, was every minute of that class session or that staff meeting maximized? And I think most of you would, if you were to say, do you think we have 3 minutes in that last staff meeting where we could have done something like this that would have, I think we all know what the answer would be. And we could be as intentional with planning our staff meetings or our classes by bringing these types of things in as we are the academic content. And we realize that one supports the other and that one actually is foundational to the other. So that's what I love, is that we can bring a lot of these kind of like really practical ones, and that could be really woven in to what we're already doing.
Talk mental, emotional, but social well-being, John. Why is social well-being critical right now?
Well, one, because we've been so isolated. We have high school students and educators that are reporting. I'm on calls all the time that are saying, I just need to figure out how to do the whole like human interaction thing again. We just know it's a skill that's needed. We were wired to be relational, right? As human beings, it is a human need that we have, right? And so much of our world is not the one-on-one like real thing, right? It's on a screen, it's in other things. And those things could be used for good, but we know that we will never be able to get enough dosage in the area of those social connections. I think this is some of the areas that we get some of the most positive feedback, is offering fun tools. And educators need tools. They need things. It's not that I don't want to do it, like, how do I do it? And so these are some of the different ways that we bring that forward that really elevate student choice and voice. Do we want to show one?
Totally. Let's try one out right now. I'm going to hop into a curriculum where one of the things that we did intentionally, all of these relational activities are woven into every one of our lessons, but we extracted them intentionally because we found that people were using these tools in lots of spaces, including other classes outside of the context of an advisory or a homeroom. And many of them, people are using them inside of staff meetings. Why? Because they're practical, low burden ways to engage in that process of social well-being, right? To improve our social connectedness through meaningful, simple, quick ways to connect. John, which one do you want to go with today?
I mean, I don't know. I always like my eyes naturally go to Deck of Destiny, but I don't want to do that. And Get to Know You, fill in the blanks. It's kind of like the compliment thing we already did. Let's go. I don't know. Let's go this or that.
This or that. Always a good one. Choose a number to reveal 2 options. Everyone shares their preference by holding up or typing 1 or 2. So all of you can participate in this.
They can do it in the chat. Okay, this will be fun.
Go ahead, John. 1 through 18.
Let's pick number 9. That's my lucky number.
Number 9. Team winter or team summer?
So 1 or 2 in the chat. Houston, what are you? I'm 1.
I am team summer. Absolutely.
See, opposites attract. We were meant to do this work together.
That's fair. Why are you team winter, John?
I love winter. Like, I love the cold. I love being in cold places with gear that you can survive in and realize like you couldn't just be here without, like, I love being on a mountain with snow. I love sleeping in the snow if I could. I love just like walking outside with good warm jacket and good cup of coffee and seeing I could get really passionate about this. I love the winter, all things
you
winter.
are a gear guy. That's like, you love your gear. I am too,
Kirsten
but I
saying come
prefer
to
the summer.
Minnesota. Kirsten, I have a goal to come to Minnesota on one of those lakes that freezes over. I heard it's like the first week in December before it gets really rough, and skate on one. It's my goal. It's a dream. I'm going to make it happen. Dr. Clayton Cook lives there. He's our chief development officer. He's invited me. So it's going to happen, Houston.
Oh my goodness.
What were you
Montana
saying
just got
there,
6
though, Hugh?
inches of snow. I don't know. I'm just terrified. I'm about to go visit my mom in Maine, and it's going to be cold. Yeah. I live in Los Angeles. It's a totally different world. Let's go back. Let's do one more, John, because I just want to do connect the dots. I don't think it gets used very often, but it's a fun one. Choose a number or a letter. 4 things will appear in 2 different columns. Then connect the dots by sharing a reflection related to at least 2 of the words.
Okay, you're going to do this one. We're going to flip it. So you pick.
Yep. Let's go 4.
So you have to connect at least 2 of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a funny one. This is very relevant to what we were just talking about. I live in Los Angeles, as I mentioned, and it rained the other day, which is a very rare occurrence here, and it poured rain. And when it rains in Los Angeles, people enthusiastically post about getting cozy. I think cozy's making a big, it's making I don't know if it ever left, but like cozy is a thing here. People love the notion of getting cozy. People love holding mugs, just holding a mug is really one of the best sensations in the world, I think. So when it's raining, I feel enthusiastic about holding the mug and having a blanket on while watching a show.
Right on. And what you're seeing in the chat, and we can keep moving here, is just what happens. It's giving tools, right? Yeah. A lot of these tools that you get in the slide deck, you can do on your own, right? Some of you that are here are curriculum users, and whether it's our elementary or middle or high, there's a lot of tools like this that you can use that are built into it. And what I would say that is my favorite emails that we get, shares that we get, are what I call the double win. It's when a school is not only using it with students so that the students can be practicing the social connections and interactions more frequently, more consistently, but the double win is when they do it with their staff. They'll use these at staff meetings because we need it just as much as the students do. And that double win is by doing it with staff, not only are they getting an opportunity to connect, you're also showing them how to use the resource. And when you showcase it, they're more likely than to use it in their classrooms.
It's a natural dovetail into the second one, isn't it, John? The idea of belonging, one of the ways that we can improve or increase belonging. What is belonging? Experiences that lead to educators feeling accepted, valued, and respected as a member of their school. People that understand each other better, that know each other better, take better care of each other.
That's right.
But we need tools. We need tools to facilitate that connection. And I know one of the gifts that we get, John, of working with so many campuses is going into spaces and being able to facilitate experiences that improve or increase belonging. And we've heard reflections along the way of, wow, we've never taken the time to really just spend time getting to know each other a little bit better. And the value of that is so hard to articulate.
And I think sometimes the paradigm shift there is that we can fall into the trap of thinking that that's fluff. And I would challenge anyone who hears that or has fallen into that trap to go, no, it's not fluff, it's foundational. Mm-hmm. It's an actual foundational need, right? There is not an educator in any building anywhere that's been there for any amount of time that wouldn't connect with this statement. There were people at the high school that I worked with for 10 years, passed by him in the hallways, showed up at staff meetings, right? Went through entire years with, right? And I knew less about them in 10 years of passing casually in the hallway and showing up than someone who maybe I spent an intentional hour with doing activities like this. And I would say that's a problem. But then I have empathy. A lot of administrators or counselors or leadership teams at a building, it's not that they don't want to do it. They don't have the tools. They haven't been shown how. It's not been as promoted. When you're doing blank, because we have this initiative at the district level, this is just as important. And here are tools that you can actually use. Remember, the number one way that we teach is to role model. So we're going to give you, after this chat, some real practical ideas, but then not just the ideas, a system on how you can ensure that it's happening more. We always say systems over goals. And so we'll share that with you as well. But in the chat, what experiences promote belonging for your staff? Whether it's a real practical thing, something that you've experienced, something that you've seen, something that you've tried. What are things that you've done in your building or at the district level to promote belonging for those that are serving the students that are in your care each and every day? How do you celebrate their heritage? Equal voices during our CTMs. Just by creating teams, Julia said, right? Which could be then that system for that sense of belonging versus it's just the big staff, right? But when we can make that smaller, and I feel really connected to a team. Yeah, just in giving opportunities to have conversations instead of just telling them when it needs to happen. We always say people support what they help to create. Conversations can help to do that. Allow time for collaboration. Community circles. Spending time together outside of work. Yeah, lots of holiday gatherings this time of year. Something we're looking forward to. Yeah, social times together, right? Creating fun school traditions, right? That could be a thing. Then it doesn't feel like you have to be all things for all people all the time. You have these fun traditions that are built in that can always be getting updated, and people can be bringing their voice forward on how can we make it better. But those are things then that become a part of your system. Yeah, sharing just good news. It's that building in to the routine. So let's think about it. At the core of our work, it's all about relationships. And we know that as those that are leading the work, we need to be role modeling that. It's not just, right, what we're doing with students. It's also what we're doing for our staff so that they can better care for our students. Here's some practical ideas. Rituals to acknowledge and recognize. So when we say when educators who feel valued and appreciated for who they are and what they do, then what goes up? Belonging, engagement, and retention. How important is that word right now? Right? To retain our staff in a time where we see in a lot of places, right? Educators potentially leaving the profession or getting that sense of burnout at a higher rate than ever before. Well, what are some rituals that we can use to acknowledge and recognize? We'll give you some practical examples, but we're going to actually send you, if you want to open that up, Hugh, you'll get this as a download, as a resource. We're probably putting it in the chat right now as well, but it'll be a part of that page that we send you. That goes beyond even the examples and ideas that we're sharing right now. Anything that you'd add to this, Houston, before we share a couple specific examples?
No, it's just it's a space, again, to give you a little toolbox of strategies. And we'll give some more on the far side of this. But so many people earlier said that one of the things that increases well-being is feeling acknowledged and recognized. A lot of people feeling seen in their work. And so here's some really practical ways, if you're a leader in a building in any way, to facilitate that.
We're going to send that to you. When you think about some different rituals, how can we use students to acknowledge and recognize staff? Right? We come up with a whole different list of ideas. How can we use families to acknowledge and recognize staff? What are some random acts of kindness that we could do for our staff during the year, right? And getting more specific and how we do that, right? Within what amount of time and in this way can get us more specific types of ideas versus generic ones. Sometimes just small notes with powerful messages can go a long way. I don't have the time. Do you have time to write 3 30-second messages today and leave it for a staff member? The key will be, how do we actually build that into a system so it's not a one and done? We're going to share some different ideas here, but one is like indirect compliments through others can be really powerful. Taking over duty, giving that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let's talk about some of those staff challenges that we utilize to promote exactly this, systems around. Sometimes classroom relationship building, but also that staff to staff piece, which is so critical.
So we're sharing this with you. You'll get these. We also have them in a place where if you want more, we have years worth of what we call staff character dares. It's really translated our proactive relational strategies, some of which are focused on staff to student, some of which are focused on staff to staff. And some of these proactive ideas, strategies are focused on staff to families. It's an entire library. And you can hover over one, right? And see a little preview. You could click into one, like go to Staff Lounge Surprise, or this one, yeah, 10 things. And just functionality wise, what's fun is, let's say that your school colors are blue in the upper corner. It's a little thing, but people love it. You can change it. You can download these. You can print them out. People will put these in the Staff Lounge. I think the reasons why these work is they're not you have tos. They're just ideas. They're planted seeds. Like some schools, they every week have their staff character day of the week that they put out and share as a challenge, right? And I think one of my favorite comments from an educator who was exposed to this and had a paradigm shift, they said, you know what did it for me on these challenges? Is that at first I was always like really skeptical, thinking, well, what if not everybody's into it? And she said in our collaboration here at our table, she was at a conference that we were hosting. She said, my colleague here challenged me on that and said, what if 30% of our staff actually did it the week that we put it out? What kind of an impact do you think would happen if even that week, 30% of our staff, knowing that for the others, it's a planted seed? Sometimes we need ideas like 10 things you don't know. Create a list of 10 things about yourself. The rest of the staff doesn't know. Share it out. There's probably a lot of different fun ways that we could share it out. The end of the list, challenge someone else to do the same. Might get creative on how we do it or how we share it. Another idea, secondhand compliment. What if you had a goal, right, over the course of the week that you're going to do a certain number of these? You walk into a colleague's classroom. This could be as an administrator, it could be as and there's obviously skill. It's a little higher risk potentially, but the payoff can be huge. We call it secondhand compliment. You walk in and you compliment them in front of their class. Did you know that Mr. Whoever, Miss Whoever, this is why I appreciate it. And you just walk out. The students are like, ooh, what's that? That's our principal. It's like, or whoever it might be. And the power of that. Sometimes we need other ideas. For administrators, it's the same thing, right? A lot of times, not that we don't want to, it's I need ideas. So in our CharacterStrong gym, which is a library of resources, this is where you can find an entire series of these. And for administrators who are leading the work and in such a critical position, these are focused on admin to student, some of the ideas, admin to staff, and admin to families. Once again, you can hover over one and see kind of what it is. You can click into one. So you can find all of these in our CharacterStrong gym. Obviously, you're going to get the slide deck and get some of these ideas for free, but this is probably my favorite. And it has gotten some of the most traction because it can really fit into anything. This could be an administrator with their staff. This could be a teacher with their students. This could be a district leader with those that they oversee. Maybe they're principals. Like I know the Beth here oversees principals. It could be something that you use with your principals over the course of the year if you're at the central office. And the reason why I think it's so powerful is it's simple and it's a system to put a lot of what we're talking about into action. So for staff chips, the idea here, let's say you go purchase an inexpensive set of chips. It could be a bunch of just wood chips from Amazon, poker chips. You can make a lot of different ways. You just get little chips and you put each person's name that you're overseeing. So if I'm a classroom educator, I'm going to put each of my students. If I'm a building principal, each of my staff. If I'm a central office, right, each of those that I oversee. And I'm going to put all of those chips in a bucket. I could just do a basic bucket. I could get really fancy with that bucket, whatever you like, right? And then you get another bucket, an empty bucket. And then as a leader, what I do is when I come in for that day, I just grab a small handful. Maybe I grab 3 to 5. And the idea is with those 3 to 5, I'm going to try to be intentional with those 3 to 5 to take that extra moment. Take that extra step to connect more than just, hey, good morning. Maybe I stick around for the second question. Maybe I write that note that takes really 30 seconds to 60 seconds and I leave it. Maybe I send that extra email. There's a lot of different ways that I can intentionally connect, but that's my challenge. And maybe because of all that's coming at me that day, I grabbed 5, I got 2. But here's the thing, I got those 2. I intentionally connected in some way and I moved those 2 over to the empty bucket. And then the next day I repeat. And it doesn't mean that those are the only people that I connect with. Like I'm walking down the hallway and I'm like, you're not one of my chips, Houston. I can't connect with you. No, that's silly. but those 3 to 5, I'm going to be intentional. And you can see what it's going to do. As a leader, where there's so much overwhelming coming at me, by the end of the year, I could probably tell you, I intentionally worked my way through that entire bucket 3 times. I know that everybody in my staff, or all those that I oversee, got at least 3 intentional connections from me during the year. And the reason why, because I had a system to put those goals into action. We put this in a principal Facebook group once, Houston. I think it got shared or reshared over 500 times. Why? Because you look at it and you're like, yeah, that would work. It makes sense. It's not complicated.
And it's one of just many of these practical low burden ideas. And I love the premise that, it's not one size fits all. Some people look at this and are like, this is perfect for me. Someone else might say, you know what? This is the strategy. Positive phone call home. Yes, adults or educators should do it with students. Do we make the time as administrators opportunity, right? To make that positive phone call home to an educator, not with I need something, but with rather, hey, here's gratitude. I'm really grateful for you. And just even using this in combination with something like staff chips could be powerful.
I had one just real quick, Houston, and this once again, connects with it. I had an administrator that I was on a podcast with and talked about that at the beginning of the year, they had kind of the survey that they send out, finding out a lot of things. One of the things they found out that they were looking for was like important people in their life. So sometimes they put their mom, or it could be their partner, or whoever else, and contact info. And sometimes during the year, they would actually reach out to secondhand compliment to someone important in their life. So they took it a whole extra step, not just calling the educator, and yet didn't tell that educator they were doing it. So that's that true secondhand, right? Like, I got a call from your principal today, and it's not because they're a student. And they were like really raving about how incredible you are because of blank, blank, and blank. Gosh, what kind of impact would something like that have for a staff member that needs it? Yeah, someone says, especially during the holidays or the summer months.
So many strategies like that and like this. Another tool we use, establish, maintain, restore, just taking that staff roster and taking a look at what is the relational standing. Do people feel like that sense of belonging or well-being? And just going through each name and saying, am I still establishing a relationship with this person? Am I maintaining a relationship? Or am I in need of restoring a relationship with this person? A simple exercise that gives you a little focus, right? With our limited energy to say, you know what? If I were to only connect intentionally this week with a small handful of people, maybe it's this group over here, 1 or 2 folks that I'm establishing a relationship, learn something more about them. Maybe there's one person that I really need to spend time with restoring that relationship.
Yeah, it's a research-backed strategy. It's one that educators can use with students, but we can also do as administrators, as leaders in the building. It's a simple reflection exercise at the end of a week, at the end of a month, to know how we're doing with the relationships of those that we oversee.
You talked a little earlier, John, about random acts of kindness. As you know, I'm a big believer in deep kindness and intentional, focused, practical kindness. And it's another way we can promote belonging, is just creating systems that put a focus on the action or the exercise of kindness regularly in our life. So one of those things that I want to share is just a series of 5 days. One of those things that you'll get coming out of today, you'll get these slides. 5 days, each one of them with 10 minutes or less. The person, each challenge or invitation is focused on one person or one specific group of people, and they're rated by difficulty as well. So this day 1, focus on yourself, 3 minutes or less, on the easier side. Day 2, we start to expand it out a little bit. Put a focus on family. Take 5 minutes to write a note of appreciation to someone at home and hide it in your fridge for them to find. Bonus points if you incorporate a food pun. Day 3, focus on friends. Day 4, a focus on staff. And day 5, focus on the district office. So just 5 days. Another thing that you'll walk away with today, people respond to different tools in different ways. Some people really like the idea of that weekly sort of challenge. Some people are going to use the 8 different ways for a focus on appreciation, especially this time of year. Or maybe you just need 5 days of consistent kindness, right? Both for yourself, friends, family, and the people that you serve.
Kelly had a good food pun, Houston. I'm bananas about food puns.
Thank you,
What I love though too, Houston, the most effective principles that I see, they not only keep it fresh by bringing different ways forward like this, they then provide time. So it's not just, here's this thing that you should do with the limited time that you already don't have. They'll actually make time for it as a part of the staff meeting, as a part of the time together, because they realize and are saying by giving that time that it is as important. Our culture, our climate, taking care of each other, putting a focus on relationships is as important as the other things that we're doing and talking about here. So a key in terms of that leadership is then providing opportunities to do that in that space.
Talk well-being, belonging. Spend a little bit of time as we're wrapping up talking about engagement. Culture of engagement is a space where there's experiences that promote enthusiasm, dedication that educators have toward their professional role and their school. Interested as you're sort of processing, are there some experiences that promote engagement on your staff? What are some of those? And as those are coming in, John, let's dive into a few concepts that we talk about here. 2 categories that we'll share: resources and routines. The first one, a resource that we actually just recently built into particularly our secondary curricula, called 60-second solutions, quick strategies for boosting engagement. And if you come over here, you'll notice if you have access to 6th through 8th or 9th through 12th, we have this little library of resources. You can click on engagement resources. And the idea behind each of these is that it's a short strategy with a video that's 60 seconds or less, sort of invites a practical way to increase engagement in the context of a classroom. Now, this isn't true only in classrooms. This can also be used in a staff meeting in lots of ways, or role model some of these tools in a staff meeting to then translate into a classroom. Let's give, in the slides here, you'll actually receive a few of these. The ones that are in black here are clickable. John, which one do you want to take a look at?
Let's go the floor burner.
Floor burner.
And here's why I love this. And I just think this is really important, Houston, when you think about engagement. Like one you were showing, if anybody that is here that's using our curricula, one of the things that we'll hear sometimes is, we have some teachers that are just rocking it, and we got some that are struggling with engagement. And what we realize is it's not the content necessarily that's not engaging. So I need more tools. I need more strategies. So that's why we had built into it now these 60-second solutions, ideas that are right built into it that could help us to increase engagement. It is how we are delivering the thing, how we are facilitating the thing, because there is in every building people who are absolutely rocking it when it comes to engagement. Why? What's different? And so when you think about this, we need to be reminded. I know that when I first came out of teacher college, I did this one. You didn't have to tell me. I was moving in the classroom. I had proximity down, but you come into my classroom in year 4, to be honest, I got lazy. I started to stay more towards the front of the room. And what I needed to be reminded of is almost up to 50% of low-level behaviors, off-task behaviors, can be addressed by one strategy. You got to move. You just got to move. You got to be in proximity. And sometimes when we think about engagement, right, or feel like it's not there, it's because we're seeing an increase in the low-level behaviors or off-task behaviors. And sometimes we got to be reminded of the strategies that are right within our control, that are highest leverage. So I love the floor burner. There's a little how-to video. I think sometimes we need to be reminded of this as administrators as well in staff meetings. You ever called out a staff member in a staff meeting because they weren't paying attention? How did it go? Could it have been addressed?
EMR?
Yeah, could it have been addressed? Yeah, could it have been addressed by maybe even just moving into that proximity? I know that it worked with my principal when I was a staff member and sometimes off task at a staff meeting. They came over. I'm like, oh, yep, I'm with you. Right? And so sometimes we can put those in front of our staff. It can really help when it comes to boosting engagement.
So behind each of these,
go ahead.
Yeah, behind each of these are some little practical strategies. Another one of my favorites is the influencer. You can replace students with staff. Identify 2 to 3 students or staff in your group who are influential. Sometimes the most influential people in the room aren't using their influence positively. Find moments to connect with these students individually and ask them to help co-lead a session. One of my favorite simple strategies to bring voices forward and see if you could take someone who maybe is causing off-task behavior in a class take what is naturally their influence and redirect it towards something positive. We hear this all the time when it comes to like, we're having staff buy-in issues. And the reality is so often when it comes to especially work around social and emotional learning, it's actually not a buy-in issue so much as it is a readiness issue. A lot of people are actually bought in with the process. They want to do it. They just need tools on how. But sometimes you have a few people on staff who tend to have the louder voices, who are the ones who are maybe creating the perception of a buy-in issue. When in reality, most people on staff want to be about the work, looking for tools to do the work. You just have a few influential people who are using their voices loudly. What if we took a strategy like this and went to that person directly? Said, hey, you know what? You are so good at X, Y, and Z. Would you help me lead these relational activities with the staff next week? In fact, would you rewrite one of the questions with one of your favorite get to know you questions? And taking that person who might be using their influence less positively, bringing them in, appreciating them, and then seeing if you can use that influence for good.
Someone said in the chat, where can we find these? Well, you're going to get the ones that are bolded here. You're going to get these in the slide deck that we send to you. We're going to put it into the follow-up for attending today, for being with us. If you want more than that, those that have been asking, it is in our CharacterStrong gym. It's a part of our curricula. Going beyond that, and I think this is where many struggle, is it's not just that classroom educator need this. What about me as a building leader? I would like some support with how to really give a boost to our staff culture and climate. We have entire staff culture climate trainings. We've got an entire new flagship training that's coming out late this winter, where it really is digging deeper into what's happening in each individual classroom, that school-wide approach that really can continue to build that readiness, what we sometimes call buy-in. And then there's tools that you could provide them, like what we're showing here today. And then for those that are at the central office level here or the building level, I need help with how do we continue to implement those systems that you're talking about. I think that's one of the things that really makes us unique, is combining those three. It's the adult work that is so critical. It's the tools, the resources, curricula, right? The supplemental resources, but then it's those implementation system supports that are so needed.
Well said, John. And people are asking, where do we find some of these tools? If you're a curriculum user, for example, I'm looking at grades 9 through 12 here. And an example, resources, engagement resources is where some of these 60-second strategies live. What we're about to show comes in the CharacterStrong gym. Supplemental resources that most of our schools use in conjunction with the curriculum to add some more of those culture components, things like those staff, admin, family, student character dares. But also what we're about to show, which is a brand new addition to our work, is our entry task library. In fact, if I load this up, we'll use grades 9 through 12 as an example. One of the things that we know to be true is the power of routines. Power of routines and increasing engagement, both in a classroom environment or a staff meeting type environment. If I know what to do right when I sit down in a space, if I have a routine of some kind, right, we learn to engage in that thing when we first sit down in that given space. What if we just had, again, those resources that made that process easier? So all I have to think about is making sure that I'm starting the routine, but I don't have to think about generating the content of the routine itself. So we started building out these entry libraries. We'll show you what one of them looks like as an example. I'm clicked into 9 through 12th grade. And the idea is a space that you could come into every single day and have a resource. And we created 3 categories: connect, create, and check in. Connect prompts focus on belonging. Check in focuses on well-being. And create focuses in some way on creative expression or engagement. So each of these have tools. For example, we could have some better than average get to know you questions.
It's a great
time. And when I click in this and it loads up, you'll see a whole list. Of different get to know you type questions that you could use as a starter. People are turning and talking, writing down their answers, think, pair, share. These are available to download in a digital format to bring them into your own slide deck, or a printable format if you wanted to have them on paper. My personal favorite, John, is without lifting your pen. I love this exercise from a creative standpoint. Each activity invites students to draw a picture without lifting their pen or paper or pen off of the paper. So draw your favorite animal without lifting your pen. Draw your dream place to live without lifting your pen. Practical resources that we know help support the routines that we know drive engagement. So, number one, behaviors that promote well-being, behaviors that cultivate belonging, and behaviors that drive engagement. These are the 3 highest leverage moves we can make right now. Maybe you take that needs assessment to understand where you're at, where you need the most targeted support, and work backwards from there, hopefully using some of the tools that we provided today. A couple things to know.
Yeah, real quick, as we go to this, I'm getting messages, direct messages in the chat, like, I don't have these. How do I get access? We can get you set up immediately. So if that is you, because I've got multiple of those, just message us, info@characterstrong.com. If you're interested in the curricula or the CharacterStrong gym or any of those resources, it is something that we could get you set up with immediately or connect with you on. So just know that info@characterstrong.com. It could be a great place to start, and we'll take care of you there. All right, upcoming events.
A couple things to know about. I'll be leading a middle school and high school walkthrough of our curricula. So if some of the things were interesting to you today, we'll go deeper into how that content was built, how you can use it in the context of an advisory or a homeroom or lots of other spaces. I'm leading that next week on Wednesday. And the next day after that, on Thursday, an elementary curricula walkthrough. So both of those things, free demos, walkthroughs that are available to you. Even if you can't make it, just sign up and you'll get a recording of that after the fact. And then that Friday, we got a webinar specifically on Tier 2, new curriculum that we're launching, 2023.
Let me say this to you. I've been talking to district leaders and they're like, what? You have Tier 1, Tier 2 together that actually can talk to each other, that is connected. There's not a school anywhere that doesn't need more support with Tier 2. So this will be Dr. Cook and his team. It's very exciting. People are getting very excited about this. And so if you want to be some of the first to know and to learn more, this would be a great one to attend on either of those. And it's going to be coming out this spring. We will have a Tier 2, not just interventions and how to match those interventions, but a curricula for all grade levels that is Tier 2. So no longer do you need to go buy a bunch of different workbooks here and there to try to patch something together. It'll be all in one place. We're very excited about the Tier 2 piece coming out.
We also come spring of this year. One of the things that we started at in 2020 was our Whole Child Summit. We got another one this year. This will be number 3, John? Number 4.
Number 4.
Oh my goodness. This one's specifically conversations around mental health. Sign up for it today just so you're in the know. I had my first interview yesterday with Dr. Loretta Whitson, who is the executive director of the California Association of School Counselors. It's an awesome conversation filled with some low burden practical strategies, putting a focus on that well-being, which we know we need so much. So sign up for that if that's of interest to you. And as a reminder, we have all of what we talked about today, including some real practical resources for each of these categories we shared, and the slides from today's webinar. You'll receive that as well as the recording from today in a follow-up email coming soon.
That was fun, Houston.
Always is, John.
Do this again sometime with this crew. This crew was fun that showed up today.
That's true.
So many fun comments in the chat. More compliments too than we deserve. They're like, you guys are good together. Yeah, I don't know. I appreciate the you're just being kind. I think they just did one of those prompts, but it was fun. Thank you, Houston. That was a lot of fun. Look, Kelly's dropping it all. A very sweet day. She's going to be doing food puns all day long. I love it. Have a great day, everyone.
See y'all next time.